Well, I see these little things on Twitter, these little anniversary things, they make me harken back to my younger days. I mean, we talked about Live Aid a few days ago and seeing all the video snippets of U2 and yeah, the dog agrees. And Queen. You know, it just brings back memories. But today, I'm flipping through Twitter, and I see that today was the 27th anniversary of the release of the original Die Hard.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, that makes me feel so damn old because I was an usher at a movie theater in suburban Buffalo in 1988. And one of the jobs as an usher was to put together the cardboard standees, like in the lobby.
The cardboard Bruce Willis.
Right. It was a cardboard Bruce Willis with the building, with the Nakatomi Plaza in the background burning. And the general reaction of everybody who looked at the standee was, Bruce Willis in an action movie? What the hell's going on? Because you got to remember that Bruce Willis before that was Moonlighting.
Yeah.
And Blind Date, this Blake Edwards movie with Kim Basinger.
Yeah.
And the only thing that he ever did that was sort of was he did a Miami Vice where he was like a drug dealer.
Right. He was always in that wise guy kind of role.
Right. He was always the, right, exactly. The wisecracking romantic lead type of thing.
Yes.
And, so we all looked at the standee and said, this movie's going to be a friggin' joke. I mean, and traditionally we would run a sneak preview of the movie on Thursday night. I was also a projectionist, we would build up the movie, tape, spliced everything together, the reels together, put the previews on, the whole 9 yards. So I think I was the one who did it, and we had like 50 people come, and usually we didn't have that many people, so there was some anticipation, maybe word of mouth, and Russ, I was friggin' blown away. I mean, the movie is, still I can watch it.
It's a great movie.
Yeah, but
although I hate the fact that he's in the same damn tank top the whole movie, and it just gets a little dirty, but it doesn't. I mean, that thing should have been disgusting and not wearable, really.
Right.
But okay.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he was, and right. I mean, he was like completely filthy and blood soaked at the end of it, but the shirt was sort of like off white. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, though I know that I remember somebody commenting that the most disgusting thing was like at the end of the movie when he kisses his wife. He's all soaked with blood and he like makes out with his wife, and some of the women were like, they're like, oh, gross.
Would do it too, so whatever.
Yeah, exactly. They would have complained, but I'll say one other thing. And till my dying day, that movie, I love Bruce Willis. I like his movies, and that was a great movie. But that movie would not have been as good a movie if it wasn't for Alan Rickman playing Hans Gruber.
Yeah, no, he made it. I mean, he's a tremendous actor. He was very creepy. He was very decisive in his terror. He was great.
Yeah. So, okay, and wanted to.
Here's one more blast from the past, too. I don't know if you can see this.
Okay.
Collector's Cup here. Trump Taj Mahal. Vote for Trump. He'll put that out. He'll put the White House out of business, too.
Yeah, no. I think Trump is having some problems when he keeps putting Nazi stormtroopers on his advertisements. I mean, I'm not going to get into the political. I'm not going to get into the political thing other than think that Trump is a joke, and he's not going to get close to the nomination. So it's I won't even.
Better people. Like a friend of mine made that point. My friend Doug. He's like, he doesn't agree with what he's saying, but he's like, hire better people so these things don't happen, and actually hire a real writer. Like he doesn't. He seems to be doing this all on his own, and that's why it's going to even be worse.
Right, because honestly, he has to do certain things to be part of the political process. He has to officially say he's going to run and do a financial disclosure. I don't think he's done all that. He's sort of delaying it. I think this is all like a disclosure
this time. I thought he actually did it, but I could.
Yeah, I mean, if he has, I haven't heard of it, but I'm getting the feeling this is going to be like one of his usual. This is going to be basically the Republican version of Mario Cuomo. He's going to tease people, and then he's going to pull out at the 11th hour, and he's not going to run.
What we should do is ask Herschel Walker how many years of that lifetime contract he got actual checks for.
It's funny because I was flipping through the dial last night after the All-Star game, and I want to touch on that for a second before we get into the hockey. And I was flipping through ESPN Classic, and they had the 30 for 30 on the USFL, and how things would have been different for the USFL if John Bassett hadn't been dying of a brain tumor, because he was the guy who's sort of running everything, and he would have kept them a spring football league. But because Trump and his egomania took over, he decided he wanted to go head to head against the NFL, and he won in a sense, but he got $1, and you know, so.
It was bad. I was in Houston at the time watching the Gamblers and Jim Kelly. I was in college, and that was an exciting thing because if I was home in New York, I wouldn't have been watching anything. Maybe Trump's games were shown in New York. I guess they were. But I got to see those games, and it was pretty cool because Mouse Davis really ran a great offense. So I enjoyed watching that. All that said, you're right. They needed to be the opposite of the NFL, and they weren't.
I learned two things from that special yesterday. The New Jersey Generals play-by-play announcer was Charlie Steiner.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that. And then I knew that there was a really famous game.
Wait, should I say the very boring Charlie Steiner? Sorry, Charlie. He's good with facts. He knows his sports. He's just boring.
Well, John Sterling doesn't like him too much, but we won't go into that. And then also the Houston Gamblers LA Express game was apparently the greatest game that nobody saw. It was a game that Kelly threw for like 571 yards and 5 touchdowns, and there were 6,000 people at the LA Coliseum, and I don't think it was broadcast on television.
Now, who was the LA Express quarterback? Was that Steve Young?
Steve Young, yeah. So yeah. Two of the 3 Hall of Famers that played in the USFL. Do you know who the third one was?
Reggie White.
Bingo. Yeah. So only 3 players, and that's a little surprising, but
it is a little surprising. But I think a couple of them could have been close had they not gotten injured. They had some really good talent there. They did.
Yeah. Well, let's quickly transition to the All-Star game. I don't want to talk about the game, but. No. You know, because I mean, honestly, I think it was the first All-Star game. I had some friends over last night. A friend of mine's from out of town, and we watched the entire All-Star game. And I think that might have been the first All-Star game that I've watched from beginning to end since maybe I was 13 years old. I mean, usually I go away for a couple innings and come back. And I mean, everybody's talking about the whole Pete Rose thing. I
give you a 1 second thing on the Pete Rose. Remember when they had the MasterCard greatest team ever?
Yes.
He invited Pete Rose for that. He was on the field. He got his waves. He didn't get reinstated. I think they did a deal with him here. He got a commercial. He got on Fox. He's not going to get reinstated. That's just my feeling.
Yeah, he's not going to get reinstated because, I mean, I think this is I sometimes think that this whole thing with Rose is a battle between the networks, because now Rose is on Fox. He's part of their coverage. And all this talk was about him getting reinstated. And then all of a sudden, ESPN Outside the Lines comes out with this 30-year-old stuff about him gambling as a player. I mean, he probably gambled his entire career.
That's the thing. None of us are shocked by it. And I think what Manfred will look at in the end is, okay, this guy supposedly came clean for the book, and he didn't come clean for that. Yeah. So, I don't think there's anything there. But I did enjoy Jacob deGrom's performance. 10 pitches, 9 strikes. We're the only book, numbers don't lie, New York Mets, that actually has Jacob deGrom in a book, so people should buy it. Go ahead. Sorry.
Plug. The question, because I've debated this. What is the more boring time of the sports year? This week, where I turn on ESPN just as the All-Star game is ending, and they're showing WNBA highlights. And so there's nothing going on except the All-Star game, and there's nothing going on tomorrow. And then finally Friday, we got games back. Or the week in between the NFC AFC championship game and the Super Bowl, when we have the NHL All-Star break and the Pro Bowl. To me, I can't decide which one is the worst of the two.
I'll tell you why. This one is worse because we get inundated with the ESPYs, because ESPN came up with the great idea. Hey, on the week of death in sports, let's just plug the hell out of the ESPYs, and that's a terrible performance, show to watch too. I would never watch. I'd never watch the ESPYs. I have no interest, zero interest in most award shows. There's a few that I'll watch, but I'm not watching that. So I think this week's the worst. I do. I have one quick all-star story I could tell you. When I was a kid, I used to work up at the corner at a deli, and just before, and I want to say 87 is when Bo Jackson was doing the climb into the wall.
Right.
I was working at a deli. My mom goes, "Hey, I need whatever it was, roast beef, turkey. Can you go get some?" And of course, it's 5 minutes before game time. Now, the deli was up the street, so it literally was a 3-minute walk. But when I went to the deli, the owner was lazy because he knew I worked there. He goes, "Get it yourself." So I go behind the counter to get it myself, and I sliced my finger open. I sliced it up on the slicer. The tip of my finger came off. And, they do grow back, but it hurt a lot, and I'm bleeding everywhere. And so they ended up cutting my cold cuts for me. I run back home, and I got a big thing on my finger, and luckily I didn't miss too much of the game. And I just looked at my mother, and I'm like, see what you did? This is
So if you were getting sausage, it would have been blood sausage.
Yes. Yep.
Let's start the show. Do the intro. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, July 15th, 2015.
Oh, I guess it's me. I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Yes, it is. And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockeybuzzcast here on Hockeybuzz.com. Eklund will be off for the rest of the week. It'll be me. It'll be Russ. It'll be a cast of characters today, tomorrow, and Friday. Eklund should be back on Monday. We may have Kevin Allen coming in at some point during the rest of the week, but definitely we'll have him back next week. We had a couple signings, couple significant signings. One was a unrestricted free agent. The other was a pending unrestricted free agent at the end of the 2015-16 season. Let's go with Johnny Oduya first. He signs with the Dallas Stars, a 2-year deal at $7.5 million, $3.75 million per. For a 33-year-old defenseman who won 2 Stanley Cups. I didn't realize he was that old. I thought he was a little younger.
Yeah, he did come in old. That was the thing. But I probably wouldn't have guessed his age right either. To be fair,
and he didn't put up great offensive numbers last year with Chicago, but he'll be a stabilizing force for the Stars, and in a sense replaces Trevor Daley, who they traded to get Patrick Sharp. Yeah. What do you think of what do you think of the moves that Jim Nill has made, bringing in Sharp in that deal and now adding Oduya for the amount?
I think it's similar to what Tampa did. Tampa brought in Callahan. Callahan got them Strawman. Well, Sharp got them Oduya, and so I think that really helps this team, and I think they're a playoff team now. We talked about it maybe a week ago that we thought Oduya might lean their way because they're a little short on D and a little inexperienced. And so now that really bolsters them. It gives some of their younger guys a chance to play different roles, play other than Klingberg, like Alexiak now can play a bottom pairing role and not have any pressure. Those things are good. I mean, he's definitely a top 4 guy. And I think it's a great signing for them. It's a little short term, but they still have a decent amount of youngsters in the queue. They still have to build that up. That really did get strip mined a few years back. But you know what? They're not in a bad place. They're in a better place, I think, than they were last year, and they didn't have to give up too much to just spending money.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nill leaves his options open with this signing because, they have a top 4 now of Klingberg, of Oduya, Goligoski, and maybe Jason Demers. Demers and Goligoski. Yeah, it's not terrible. And Demers and Goligoski are UFAs at the end of the year. So you have Klingberg locked up long-term. You have Oduya locked up through the 2016-17 season. They conceivably could use the cap money that they clear when Goligoski goes free agent and Demers goes free agent to sign somebody big out there if there's a defenseman in the market that they find or want. So I think that they leave their options open, and they don't have to make a trade for somebody right now. They can see if the youngsters develop and give it time. So I think it was a good move.
I like it. I think fans in Dallas, they went through a couple of years where they didn't sort of know where the club was. Jamie Benn's on the rise. Seguin, he's always going to produce. And I think now they're a team on the rise. I think they are going to, look, it's still the West. It's going to be hard. but I think they'll battle for the 8th spot, and I think that's good. And they even got goaltending depth, right? That was an important thing too.
I still don't get that signing unless they're going to trade Lettinen. But maybe they're just
splitting the goaltending regular season, and then towards the playoffs we'll decide maybe who's that guy, because I just think it's a matter of, and I've covered Lettinen his whole career, his draft, everything. And I just think he's been too injury prone because he's played a lot of games. And so I think they're just trying to limit his games. I do.
Yeah, and and if he does go down, you have a number one goalie, a guy who's played number one goalie in the NHL, and Niemi, who can handle the job. So the other signing, which caught me a bit by surprise, not because it happened, but because it happened now, and the money that they spent, was Ryan Kessler getting locked up for 6 years. $41.25 million, $6.875 million per season. It's got a no trade, no move, I believe, for the first 5 of the 6 years. Somebody reported it was the exact cap hit that Patrice Bergeron has from the Boston Bruins on his long-term deal. It's just a couple years shorter, but I think Kessler is a few years older than him, so that makes a bit of sense. Russ, I like Kessler. I think he's a good two-way player. I think
not older than Bergeron now, but you mean older than when Bergeron signed the deal?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think. Well, Kessler, I think is 31 or 32. I can look it up, but I
31. He's soon to be 31.
I thought Bergeron was still under 30, but I'm not.
I think you're right, but I just wanted to sort of clarify it because I think the way you said it, maybe people would think that it's. Now.
Yeah, he signed as a younger player. He signed a max 8-year deal, whereas Kessler, as an older player, signed a shorter deal. I think they were using Bergeron's contract as sort of a comparative. But the thing is, I like Kessler. I think he's a fine second line center. You saw that the double him and Getzlaf as a 1-2 worked well. I just don't know. I mean, there were concerns about him, starting to slip in Vancouver, and that was the reasons why they traded him. And now he gets 6 more years at this kind of cap hit. I'm a little questioning it,
Well, I think he did prove himself, though, with Anaheim, in the sense that his durability has been there now. So whatever was ailing him in Vancouver hasn't really ailed him in Anaheim. I mean, I think this year he had 31 goals or something like that, right? So, I mean, he was close high 20s, 30s, something like that. He's an elite defensive player. We know that. He's a physical player, so I know that's where you worry about the term a little bit. But down the line, this isn't going to look like that bad a signing where for 3 or 4 years, it's really going to be the right signing for them, I think. And I think I could see why they did it. I think, he's pretty much a perennial all-star right now where he is in his career. I think this is a guy you expect to be there. So I'm okay with it. I don't think there's a reason for people to sort of rip it because they're worried about the term on it. I think he's under $7 million.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, at the end of the day, what does $7 million get you? Ryan O'Reilly's getting $7 million. He's a really good player. He's not Kessler. He's younger. So you're paying for youth, but you're not necessarily paying for as many results. I'm pretty sure O'Reilly hasn't reached Kessler's high point limit in his career yet. Mm-hmm. And so, I have to look at it that way. And Kessler is a really good hockey guy. Like, he once called me in the Olympics. There was a day off in between the gold medal game, the one where Crosby won it for Canada when the U.S. was playing.
I think I remember that one.
Yeah. He called me the day in between to do an interview to talk about that final gold medal game. And that's unbelievable. Like, you try and get somebody from another sport, the day before the Super Bowl or something that's not hooked into all of the other press to just call somebody.
Yeah, NFL security would cut the phone line.
They would.
Kessler had 20 goals and 27 assists in 81 games last year for the Ducks. So, secondary offense, second line center, penalty killer. He's the main guy against the other team's number one center. He did
face-offs.
Yeah, did a good job against Jonathan Taves in the playoffs.
Yep.
I'm not disputing. I'm just
I know. It's a 6 years is what's getting everybody, but you know what? I always look at it like this, and then of course you see the people that say, "Well, they're paying him for past performance." Not really, because if you're saying that, that would be they're paying him for Vancouver time too, and they're not. They've seen some results here in Anaheim. They're pretty much the same results he's been given most of his career. I'm sure his point totals could have been a little higher in Vancouver because of the Sedins, but at the end of because of that power play. But at the end of the day, the role he's playing now is perfect for the way the NHL is, and he's got size. They got to make the deal. You don't worry about that last year. If he's going to not be good in year 6, whatever.
Right. Yeah, and the no trade drops off in that last year, and I'm sure that the capologist with the Ducks has structured that deal that he's making significantly less. You know, and it can't be like the front loaded deal, but I'm sure he's probably making like $3 million on that last year, so it might be easier for them to move him. Moving on here in terms of contract signings, we had a slew of restricted free agents who were scheduled for arbitration settling their deals yesterday. I know the Rangers, it was Lindbergh and Emerson Edom, Eric Jelena. McElrath today. Jelena for the New Jersey Devils signed a 2-year deal for a little over $1 million a year. Mark Pazik for the Buffalo Sabres, another 2-year deal. I think it was 22 players were slated for arbitration. And if it's anything like last year, Russ, it's going to end up being like 1 or 2 guys who get to the hearing, or they get to the hearing and they'll settle it before a decision is made. What's the point of arbitration anymore?
It's like the threat of arbitration. It's a shame. It's become more of a negotiating ploy rather than something that's helpful to help the two teams. Now, some people may say, hey, look, it is helpful because it gets them to the point they want to get to. But I would think the point is you want the arbitrator to decide the market value because you haven't been able to decide it. And so whatever, at this point, it's become a game. It's part of the game. And what does Derek Stepan have? Another week, 6 days or something? It's like the 21st or something. That's the big one. Somehow they'll have other talks, even though they haven't been moving along. And we'll see. We'll see where it goes, but I don't get too worked up about it. Now, that day, if he gets awarded $7 million, a lot of people are going to get worked up about it because then the Rangers' lack of funds for Fast and Miller is going to be tough,
I'm actually surprised that they got Edom signed or got him to agree or settle for less than $1 million. I mean, he played most of the year in the NHL last year, so I would have thought that he would have gotten over the $1 million mark, but I think it was 875 or something close to that.
Yeah, they got him at a nice deal, and Lindbergh at a nice deal at like $650 a year. McElrath, who knows? He's not making much. I mean, I'm not even going to expect to see him playing many NHL games, if any. Now they just have 2 guys and Stepan. That's really what it boils down to. And the other 2 guys, they really, to me, they can't sign before Stepan unless they're getting them so cheap that there's nothing that arbitrator-wise that could happen to spoil things. So I would think that they're going to have to wait those other 2 until after Stepan or after they come to an agreement. That's sort of how I see that shaking out.
And Fast played surprisingly well. I mean, I knew of him. I'd seen him play during the regular season, but he really impressed me during their playoff run. I mean, he played a lot better than I ever thought he would play. And I think, he did himself a lot of favors in the postseason. So, I mean, I don't know if he's.
I think it's just, he finally got the opportunity. I don't think he really got that opportunity under Tortorella and even the first year of Vigneault. And he was an emerging player. I've liked him for a while. I always thought, wow, they got him in the 6th round. What a steal. And I have seen this improvement coming. And then last year was the year where it was like, okay, now they really see a big improvement. Obviously, they saw enough of an improvement that they felt like they could deal Carl Hagelin, right? So, that's good. I think every player deserves that opportunity. A lot of times players, we sometimes forget that they have this talent, but unless they get regular minutes with decent line mates in the right role, sometimes it never comes to fruition. So it has for him, and so that's good. It's not going to be great for the Rangers, though, like you said, because he's going to make over $1 million, that's for sure. And it seems like Miller might be asking for around 1.75. So then, you start doing the math, and it's like, well, that right over 6 is where the Rangers are in trouble with Stepan. Like, then all of a sudden they're going to have to get rid of a player and deal a player. And we all keep hearing the name of Kevin Kline, and I guess he's making around, my guess is, I think I heard 2.25, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
And he's worth way more, right? Like, we all know he's worth way more than that. And so you hope it doesn't come to that. But it might.
Well, I mean, the thing is, because he's making so little, because it's an economical deal, they might be able to get two for the price of one. They might be able to get two players who have reasonable contracts for one guy for a team that needs a defenseman. Say, for example, the Columbus Blue Jackets. They could get a couple guys on their entry level deals who could play for the Rangers and make a 2-for-1 swap, and that would help them. So, I mean, you don't want to give up a Klein, but I think the thing is, you can't get rid of Dan Boyle, and you're not going to trade Girardi or Stahl or McDonough. So you're sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Most would hope that they would trade Tanner Glass. Vigneault counted on him a little bit for penalty killing, and now without Hagel in there, he's probably going to count on him even a little more for penalty killing, and that's his only role. Like, that's it. That's all. I mean, other than the occasional nuisance on the ice, which he's technically not that good at anymore, that's why he's there. So that would be the better money spent to trade him out. But unfortunately, it's going to end up being someone like Klein, and that would be a shame.
Well, let's just address quickly the rumor that Eck posted on his. I know we talked about it a little bit on Monday. I expressed my reservations about it yesterday when we were talking about a Nash deal to San Jose involving Patrick Marleau, and he says in his blog prospects and or picks. I mean, the only thing I see here is the opportunity. It's 1 year less. The contract for Marleau than Nash. And after 1 year of Marleau, who's 35 years old, he's 3 years older than Nash is, you could buy him out and open up like $7 million in cap room. That's the only thing that makes sense in that type of deal. Otherwise, I think San Jose's taking them to the cleaners.
Right. And so that seems like a post-arbitration deal where Rangers couldn't come to terms with Stepan. Arbitrator rules him like $7.025 million or something. And then Jeff Gordon's like, all right, I got to clear space. I really don't want to get rid of Klein. So now I'm going to make this deal, lose a little on offense, but move into the clearing of the cap in the future and hope that there's still enough there to contend. I think that's what you're looking at if that gets made. And
Stepan's still protected as an RFA next year, and then they can extend him past that and extend Kreider as well. Right. And buy out Marleau.
That extra money allows them to go long-term with Stepan and Kreider for sure.
Right. The other name that I read off there in terms of arbitration was Pysyk, the defenseman from the Sabres, former first-round pick, who apparently was a bone of contention between ex-coach Ted Nolan and Tim Murray. Nolan wanted him up with the Sabres. Murray was in full tank mode and decided he wanted him to stay with Rochester and not burn up a year of his entry level and learn. And he had some health problems down there, but they signed him to the 2-year deal, and I think he's going to be firmly entrenched on the Sabres blue line. He's the guy I think benefits the most from the Nikita Zadorov trade, him being included in the deal for Ryan O'Reilly. I think Pysyk's going to be one of their top 4 defensemen next year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And he's a pretty good skater. He has a physical side to him, which is good. There's a little bit of offensive upside. I don't know at the NHL level how much that will come out, but it seems like there's some that will come out. Maybe he gets between 15 and 18, 20 points, something like that. And so I think that's good for Pysyk. I think he should have come up last year, but that's okay. I mean, hey, he's 23. It's not like the AHL was going to hurt him, and maybe staying away from a bad team was better for him mentally because he, in Edmonton when he played for the Oil Kings, they were really good, right? He was used to playing for really good teams. So, maybe in the end result, this will be the best thing for him.
Yeah. Now we're 2 weeks out from the beginning of free agency, and there were trades at the draft. There have been signings and trades since July 1st. And I wanted to look at the 2 teams in the West that have exchanged Stanley Cup runs the last few years. The LA Kings in the even years, the Chicago Blackhawks in the odd. Both teams are going through, for different reasons, dramatic lineup purges or changes. And the question I have is, with everything that's going on, which team is going to be better suited for contending next year? I mean, right now it looks like Anaheim is the odds-on favorite in the West, based on the fact that they really haven't changed a lot of things over. They brought in Khudobin as a backup goalie. They've kept pretty much the status quo. They've made a few changes, but they've kept the core intact. Now they've locked up Kessler. They look, to be in the position as the leading contender. Chicago, and I'll read off this list quickly, from last year or from last season: Sharp, Saad, Oduya, Richards, and probably Roosevelt are gone. Roosevelt is a UFA. They might re-sign him, possibly, if it's cheap. In are Anisimov, Tikhonov, Marco Dano, Ryan Garbett, Jeremy Moran, Corey Tropp, and Trevor Daley.
Right.
With the Kings gone are Richards, Andres Sekera, Jared Stoll, Justin Williams, Martin Jones, Robin Regier, and Slava Voinov is the question mark right now, but I think he's never going to play a game with the Kings ever again.
Yeah, I agree.
And in are Milan Lucic and Jonas Enroth. Russ, who right now is better suited to be a contender next year?
Well, this is why I hate when we do predictions, and Kevin's right, because like last year, preseason, I loved the Blackhawks, and then at some point I jumped off, and so and this year at the draft, I spoke to a Kings scout and I said, you guys are the favorite now, getting Lucic, and I really feel that. I think like that's a missing ingredient that can go a long way for them, and they still have a great goalie, and that's the edge they have over Anaheim. Anaheim doesn't have a Jonathan Quick. Matter of fact, the best thing Anaheim would be able to do is to not have a backup goalie, so then Bruce Boudreau wouldn't be able to flip-flop his goalies, and it would take one thing out of the equation. Like if he had more, Artur Zerbe, who would play like 78 games a year, it would solve a lot of problems for Anaheim, and I really mean that. I just think it just gets in his head, and he starts messing around. Can you name a time where Boudreau ever really ran with one goalie on any of, whether it was Washington or it's always the same thing, right? It always seems to turn back into that.
Varlamov and Holtby and Neuwirth, yeah. I mean, for me, I think the Blackhawks are. I mean, not to say that the loss of Sharp and Saad, to a lesser extent Richards, isn't going to hurt. I mean, they still have to re-sign Kruger. They may still have to trade Brian Bickle if they can find somebody to take on the salary. So there might.
They have young players too, right? They have Hartman and McNeil that
right.
Can grab roles too, and that's fine.
And I like Dano as a prospect. Anisimov is a good depth forward. I think he's probably going to fit in as a second or third line guy for them. I think Daly is going to replace Oduya in the top four. So I think, and they keep that core. The core is there. The question I have is, they have to sign Seabrook, and he's a UFA. And if they can't get him signed, then is he? Do they
get him signed? Listen, that will be a situation where he fits in a contract that works for them. I don't think there's any chance he doesn't get signed. And I think the fact that there's a little addition by subtraction with Roosevelt out, because he did sort of give them some good years that I don't think anybody thought he had anymore.
Right.
But I think he started to become a little bit of a liability again last year. And so now you have Trevor Van Riemsdyk, who could at least fill a role, and he's younger. And so I think the Blackhawks will still be really good, but I do like the Kings better. I do, because they got rid of the whole Mike Richards cloud. That and Voinov really hurt their season.
Yeah, and they do have a lot of youngsters down in Manchester. Manchester won the Calder Cup. I don't know if Jordan Wheel is going to make it. I mean,
Forbert definitely get a look.
Yeah,
there's no question. Forbert will probably get some time as a fill-in. Derek Forbert as a defenseman. So
Zykov. I mean, I don't know if he's
Zykov. They might wait another year on because they're patient. But if he kills it in camp, Zykov gets a role, because he's actually a guy that, even though he's a great talent, could probably play in a checking role because he's a physical player. So he might be willing to do that just to play in the NHL. So we'll see. We'll see how it works out. But I just think with all the way last year went, and they barely missed the playoffs, right? It just so much going on. With Voinov, it took them, a month and a half to get even the cap relief that they were looking for. And then the Richards thing just slogged on all year. It did.
Yeah, they had to sign Jamie McBain at $600,000 just to fit the money that they had left underneath the cap to fill in, and they actually brought him back this year because he fit well in their like a sixth, seventh defenseman role. So they brought him back, but yeah, that hindered them a lot. So. Before we get to our free agent forecast here, a little bit of a news update from Elliot Friedman, courtesy of Twitter. The Edmonton Oilers and Justin Schultz, and I won't say defenseman because that would be insulting to the word defense, have settled on a 1-year deal for $3.9 million. Russ?
They're hoping he gets 50 points. That's what they're paying him for. Well, I know his high. I think his high was 40. Yeah. But I think when he was 40, he was like a minus, like I want to say 20-something. This
is a joke that Leaf fans will get. Justin Schultz makes Jake Gardiner look like Rod Langway. I mean, really, Justin Schultz at this point in his career is one of the biggest defensive liabilities and he's been a top pairing guy for them. And that's probably one of the reasons why their defense has been so horrible. I mean, he's a turnover machine.
He is. I mean, but they've got the money. They probably think with McDavid now on the power play that maybe Schultz will have another person to feed off of, and maybe he will. Maybe he'll have 50 points, and then if he does, then this deal looks better.
Yeah, I mean, scoring is not going to be the problem. If he puts up big numbers, that's going to be great. But, I mean, they want this guy to develop as more of a two-way guy and not be a liability. It's
never been. Even in college, he wasn't a two-way guy. That's what I warn people about. It's like, look, they thought, oh, he's going to come in and he's going to light up the NHL. It's like very few college defensemen do that. That's why a guy like Mike Riley's better, because Riley actually plays defense. Even though he has a great offensive game and a great shot, guy plays defense. And so at the end of the day, you got to go with that route first. And they're trying to do it backwards. And sometimes you can get these guys like Del Zotto is a good example of a guy who was a big risk-reward guy who cut down on a lot of that risk last year. Somehow they got to get Schultz to do that. But we'll see. I mean, he's still young. There's worse signings. Believe it or not, I know people are going to laugh at that, but there are worse signings out there than this.
Yeah. Okay. I came up with this little game we call free agent forecast. We have 2 free agents. I've tried to match them up as comparables. We're trying to
match game music.
Yeah, I wish I did. I should have cued it on my phone.
Could you put a picture of Gene Rayburn up?
Yeah, or Brett Summers, or
I want to sound like Brett Summers. Listen, Mike.
Danny Flagg or Charles Nelson Riley. I remember that show really well, unfortunately. But I have six comparable free agents here. Try to match them up age-wise, talent-wise. Which ones will end up with the longest of the 2 deals or the most money? And I'll keep the list here, and we'll keep track of it. And at the end of the summer, we'll see who was sharper in terms of their predictions. First,
wait. Did I hear X putting in $20 into our weekly bet that I get it right and he gets it wrong? So
cookies. He's betting cookies. I want the double chocolate chip. Okay. The first matchup here is a pair of Thomases. Thomas Fleischmann, ex of the Anaheim Ducks, formerly of the Florida Panthers, and former teammate Tomasz Kopecki. Both of them in their early 30s. Both played for Florida last year. Both scored in single digits last season. I'm not sure if both of them are going to get NHL contracts, but let's assume that they do. Which one do you think will get a longer deal and more money, Russ?
This is like Sophie's Choice. I mean,
right.
I'm going to say Fleischmann.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Fleischmann was valued enough to actually be acquired by a team that was going to the playoffs.
Right.
And he can play
center. Risk that's no longer there, right? So I think it's made him viable again.
Right. He can play. I think he can play both center and wing, so he's got a little bit of flexibility. Where I think Kopecki is mostly a winger. He's a bigger player, and so I would say Fleischmann over Kopecki. I just wanted to match up the Thomases. I think that was I tried to bring in Thomas Caberlet, but he's over 40 years old, so that's not going to work.
No.
Okay, a battle of defensemen here. Christian Ehrhoff versus Cody Franzen. Ehrhoff is 33. had an injury-shortened season last year with Pittsburgh, but is still a pretty quality two-way defenseman. Franzen is much younger, 27, had that bad last 2 months with Nashville, but and I think he's fallen victim a little bit to over expectation in terms of what he was going to get on the market. Now I think he's going to have to settle for the type of deal that Ehrhoff settled for last year. The question is, who gets more on a 1-year deal, Ehrhoff or Franzen?
I'm going to use a car analogy on this one. So Ehrhoff is sort of like that mid-size sedan, and I think with Franzen, you're looking at maybe the car is up a level, but it has a leaky sunroof, and so now I have to sort of weigh it. Do I want the better car? And I'm gonna go with Ehrhoff, because at the end of the day, he plays better defense, and when healthy, is a better player.
I'm glad you didn't compare either one of them to a 51 restored pickup that went through a Tim Hortons.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yes. See, I'm going the opposite way. I think the fact that that Ehrhoff, I think, is a better two-way guy, but the injury situation, I think it was a concussion last year, might scare teams away a little bit, that they're not going to pay as much. Whereas Franzen, I think Franzen is where Ehrhoff was last year. He's coming off a year. He had an okay year, but he was with a terrible team in Toronto. Like Ehrhoff was with a terrible team in Buffalo. He got bought out. He goes to a situation in Nashville, which it didn't really benefit him. He didn't fit. He wasn't getting the ice time that he was getting in Toronto. There's an upside there. He's a power play point guy. He's a right-hand shot. I think he gets more money. I think it'll probably be a short-term deal, like I said, 1 year. But I think he could get probably what Oduya got, maybe a little more, maybe get up to $4 million. I think Ehrhoff's going to end up like around 2 to 2.5.
Okay, and I think that's fair. I do.
Matchup number 3, the late 30s blue liner, Marek Zidlicki versus Michael Roosevelt, who we mentioned earlier. Both, I think Zidlicki's 38, Roosevelt's 37. Roosevelt has won a Stanley Cup with the Blackhawks. Zidlicki put up good offensive numbers for being as old as he is. Scored just under 10 goals, had over 20 assists with the Devils and with Detroit. Roosevelt's coming off an injury. I think this is sort of a mixed bag. Let me go first. I think Zidlicki, if he gets a job in the NHL, is going to make more than Roosevelt. I have a feeling Roosevelt is going to end up back with the Blackhawks and probably sign one of those cap-friendly, 1 year, $1 million deals. So yeah. I think Zidlicki is going to make more.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think Zidlicki will make more. I think that was a pretty good offensive year. Is he still a defensive liability? Sure, but he could really play the power play. Roosevelt on the power play he's not there anymore, and so you're looking for more of a steadier defenseman, which I don't think he is anymore. So I'll have to go Zidlicki too.
Yeah. Here's a matchup of forwards in their early 30s. One had a pretty good second half of the season with the Edmonton Oilers, and that's Derek Roy.
Okay.
Versus Scotty Upshall, who has had some injury problems over the last few years, was relatively healthy the last 2 years. He played 63 games last year, played in the 70, played over 70 games the year before, scored 15 goals 2 years ago, scored less than 10 this year. But Roy has hopped around a lot. I mean, Vancouver and Dallas and Nashville, and then was moved and then was picked up on waivers from Edmonton and played in a top 6 role and scored 22 points in a little over 40 games. Upshall, I know that X said that there was rumors about him maybe getting a bite from the Arizona Coyotes. Again, it's wondering if either one or both get jobs. So maybe that's part of the equation here. But which one do you think will, and who will make the most?
I think Derek Roy will get a job. I think he'll make the most, because I still think they'll look at him and say, well, maybe 2 years out from his concussion problems, we'll get even a little more offense. Where unfortunately, Upshall is just not that physical player, and his speed's just not there anymore. Mm-hmm. So I think his skills have been in decline much longer, for really less about injury reasons, even though he does get injured, but more about his just talent fading. Roy at least showed when he was healthy last year, he could put up some points. He could. And so it's close, but I'll go Roy.
I think Roy gets more money because he's a center.
Yeah.
And the question is I would have thought he would have hooked on already. He might be one of these guys who gets invited to a training camp. Like Mason Raymond did a couple years ago. If you make the team, we've got a one-way deal for you, say $1 million, $1.5 million, whatever. But you have to make the team first, prove yourself.
Right.
I could see that scenario for him. I could actually see that scenario for both of them.
Briere's out there. He might be waiting for that too. So,
yeah, I mean, I have nothing to base this on other than putting 2 and 2 together. And the coaching staff and the GM are completely different. But Danny Briere back in Philadelphia,
you never know.
Or Danny Briere back in Buffalo,
never know.
Yeah, so
it's heard all of a sudden there's an issue. Hey, come into camp. Let's see what you got. You never know.
Okay, the last two matchups here I think are particularly interesting. The first one is a matchup of forwards comparably aged. The Yuri Tlusty, former Toronto Maple Leafs first-round pick we discussed yesterday, is possibly going to either Montreal or New Jersey. He's out there, and the other, I think one of the other prominent forwards is former Leaf Mike Santorelli. Who, again, like Cody Franzen, once he got traded to Nashville, he went from a second line winger in Toronto to playing third, fourth line with Nashville, and it really didn't benefit him too well. But he
feels death to most offensive players. Let's face that.
Yeah, and he I thought he played very well for Toronto. I thought he basically earned himself more than a one-year deal by the way he played. But again, that last 2 months in Nashville maybe killed that. Whereas I'll go for
can commiserate a little bit. I mean, Del Zotto too. You go to Nashville, all of a sudden your offensive numbers drop like a stone, and if they don't want you, then all of a sudden people question it. And I think at some point they're going to start having to look at Nashville and saying, all right, look at all these players. They have an offensive game. They go there and their offense dies.
I don't know whether Tlusty will make more, but I think Tlusty will get more years. I think he's going to get 2 years, 2 or 3 years on a deal. Whereas I think Santorelli is probably going to get 1. They may get around the same amount of money. So I think I'll go with Tlusty. I think Tlusty is going to get the longer of the 2 deals.
I'm going to go with Santorelli because of the greasier style of play, figuring that if he does catch on with somebody, they may see a couple of years in him where he fills a particular role that they don't have anybody on that team for. Because Tlusty, you're getting him because he's a skill guy and you're hoping that he scores a lot of points. Santorelli's sort of going to fill other roles, and so I'm going to go with him.
Okay. The last one is I put these two together because it was too much fun. And there's a lot of things that are underneath the surface, and we don't know whether those things are going to prevent them from getting any NHL jobs at all. So I think you know where I'm going here. Jarrett Stoll versus Mike Richards.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Can we throw in Don Murdoch? No, but
no.
Sorry. I had to go on that old Ranger thing, but
yeah.
Jarrett Stoll, obviously with the events in Vegas, and they were lowered to misdemeanors. I'm sure that he's involved in the NHLPA substance abuse program, because they haven't heard of anything about Stoll since the incident. Right. And Richards, we still haven't heard any of the details about what happened at the border. We've heard a lot of speculation. I'm not going to go down that road, but I'm sure he's probably involved in the same thing. The question is whether either one will get a shot.
Years up in time that someone could sign him, right? I mean, really.
Right.
And that's fair. That's why the comparison's fair. I'll go first. I'm going to say Stoll because I still think there's some fire in him, and he's healthier than Mike Richards. Mike Richards had a lot of injuries, and I don't think the fire burns like it used to. So I'm going to go Stoll.
Yeah, and the thing is, and maybe I'm wrong, but I have a feeling in a way Richards is going to wait around to find out what the outcome of this whole thing with the NHLPA, because that's $16 million
Right.
he lost out with the termination of that contract.
Right.
And $16 million for anybody is pretty tough to replace. So he might, say, okay, well, that money is gone, so I got to go out and play for another couple of years and try to get as much money as I possibly can. If he hasn't saved his money, and I hope I hope he has. Whereas Stoll, I think Stoll is more. I think he would be more amenable to signing a 1-year deal someplace and fitting in and being a part of a team. He was sort of that glue player with the Kings. I don't think it will be with the Kings again.
No.
But, some other team where he could go in and just be that third, fourth line guy, a center, checking center. I think he's going to get a job. Whereas I think Richard, I wouldn't be surprised if Richard sits out the year.
Yeah, I could see that happening with Richard. Stoll, maybe like a Florida, somebody like that, where they bring him in. They hope that it sort of helps with the culture and to sort of ignite guys and show them how to win. Maybe that's what he gets.
Russ, do you think that we're done with the big impact trades, or do you think there's still moves?
I think there's still potential moves because, let's just, for argument's sake, and this isn't, I don't think, totally outrageous. Let's say the arbitrator says Derek Stepan $7.5 million.
Right.
Well, then I don't know. Then I don't know if they're bringing Derek Stepan back. Then they might have to actually look for a trade to trade Derek Stepan, because even going beyond this year, like, I don't know what the Rangers cap situation is next year. I heard it's not great. I haven't really fully analyzed it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're going to have problems next year too. And so that may be the only way they can get out from under at that point.
In terms of committed salary cap money, right now they have a little over $46 million with only 9 players signed.
That's a problem.
Yeah, the top 3 defensemen, Klein, Lundqvist, Nash, Brassard, Zuccarello, and Tanner Glass. Everybody else is either an RFA this year or next year, or a UFA this year or next year.
Okay, so they definitely have the money if they want to pay Stepan long term, but then, like, that's going to really hurt down the road because, like, as you said, Nash goes for years, and let's say Stepan gets 7.5. If he averages, like, what's the O'Reilly deal? It's
7.5.
7.5. So if he gets the O'Reilly deal, the Rangers can do it, but will they want to do it?
Basically, Stepan will be replacing the cap hit of Nash.
Yeah.
The way, and you know what? I mean,
yeah, I think they would end up trading Stepan and keeping Nash at that point.
Yeah.
I just think at the end of the day, they're going to go for the offense. And even though Stepan is a very heady player and he had 60 points, and I think he had 60, and everything else, that's sort of like his zenith, and at least Nash, you could get more than that.
Yeah, but is there? I mean, okay.
And he's great in the playoffs. He is.
I'm not disputing that, but think of it this. Let's just think this out. Based on, say, the arbitrator says 7.5.
Right.
Or say 7. Say 7 is more reasonable. $7 million on a 1-year deal, and he's still an RFA at the end of the year. If they decide that they trade him, they have to trade him because they can't afford him. Who's gonna want a $7 million Derek Stepan who's, one more contract away from being a UFA? They would have to be willing to sign him as a long-term.
Well, I think
asset.
I think you would see the equivalent. Yeah, he had 55 points last year, 57 the year before. And I think that's what you're looking at most years with him. I think you would see what I always anticipated would happen, like that NBA sort of sign and trade deal. I think you would see that, like, where they would talk to Stepan and say, hey, we're thinking about trading you here. Would you be willing to sign long term? And then they chat and they feel like they've got a good groundwork. So then he gets traded, and then the next week he's signed there long term. And so I think you might be looking, he signs an extension. So I think that's what you might be looking at. And I think there definitely would be teams interested in him without question. And there's probably 4 or 5 teams at least that would want to get him.
Yeah. It's going to be a very intriguing situation there because I mean you sort of have the Rangers up against it.
Now, if would you call Klein a big deal? I don't know if you would call it a big deal, but it would be big from the sense that probably be 10 or 12 teams that would be interested in Klein, right? Maybe more.
Yeah, especially with his price point, especially making under $3 million and being, I think on other teams he would be maybe a 4.
Right.
You know, a second pairing guy, whereas on the Rangers he's a 5-6.
Right, but he also does have a really good shot. And when injuries did occur and he was playing on the power play, he was getting points and he was getting goals. And so there is that in his game that if someone sees that, they might say, hey, you know, even if it were like an Edmonton Oilers and say, hey, we could put him on our second power play and he's going to get some points that he's never gotten in his career before. You know, somebody might figure that out too. And then that would, you know, cause a pretty good deal to come the Rangers' way.
What the Rangers are praying for right now is that Dan Boyle just doesn't become Methuselah in the offseason. I mean, if there's a dramatic drop off with him, and they move Klein, and then they're really depending on Boyle to be something next year, and he's not, then they're in real deep trouble because then you're playing Rafael Diaz as your number 6 probably, or you're calling somebody up from Hartford.
Well, yeah, then you're looking at McElrath getting time, which I still don't think they're going to do, or you're hoping that Brady Shea is ready. Right. And that's the hope, because I know last year Gordy Clark told us he was really close to being ready. And the issue is, so if you're really close to being ready, why was he on the third pairing in Hartford even for the playoffs? And so then you kind of have to wonder, is he that ready? Now, some say, hey, they had to ease him into the transition, and I get all that. But still, third pairing in the A, I don't know. So we'll see. I think he's going to be close. But I think he has sort of not plateaued because he's got a high ceiling. But I think in the last year and a half, he hasn't improved as much as I thought he would. And so he might need a little more time. But that's your other guy. I think that's the other guy. And so that's why when everybody's assuming Klein goes, it's because they do have him hanging in the balance. They still have Matt Bodie hanging in the balance. And, you know, Matt Bodie had a really good year, and he never even got a sniff. Let me look up Matt Bodie's points.
While you're doing that, I'll just say this in terms of the team that I cover. I think there's still going to be a deal with Toronto. I think that they're going to move Tyler Bozak before training camp. Because everything fits in place with them giving Nazem Kadri more of a chance to be a scorer and maybe the number 1 center, to give him that look. And guys like Sean Matthias, who they say they want to put in a top 6 role to inflate his numbers to maybe, get more value for him at the trade deadline. And Peter Holland, who's under 25, everything fits with them doing that, rather than if they keep Bozak's the number 1 center. Unless they say you're going to be the number 2 and Kadri is going to be the number 1, and then Matthias is the number 3, and then he's not going to get the numbers that they want. So, I mean, it makes more sense that they move Bozak, and I think there are teams out there that could use a center who can penalty kill, who can play the power play, who can win faceoffs. Maybe he's a little overpriced. I don't think so. I mean, based on the prices that are out there right now, I don't think $0.2 million is overpriced.
No. Bodie had 32 points in 75 games, his first pro year, so that's a pretty good year.
Yep.
And he had 7 points in 15 playoff games. That's pretty good. He's 25. He is 6 foot. He has a year more. I don't know what he weighed in at for Dev Camp, but I'm sure he put on some bulk. And he was great in Union. Maybe he's going to get a sniff. So there are a few guys that it's not ideal, but could possibly get slid in there. So,
yeah. And I think, and one other thing, and then we'll end the show, I think Buffalo is still going to do something. They supposedly were in on Oduya. And the rumor out of Buffalo was that they had offered Oduya. And if Oduya turned down this deal and signed with Dallas, this could have been floated by Oduya's representatives to get a better offer. But supposedly the Sabres offered Oduya 3 years at $5 million per.
Okay.
Now, Buffalo is rebuilding, and they're not going to probably contend for the playoffs for the first 2 of those 3 years, whereas Dallas, I think, is a contender for a playoff spot right now.
Yeah, that's true. Could I see Klein going to Buffalo? Yeah, I could. And I'm just looking over Buffalo's list. Who could they throw the Rangers' way? Maybe they could. Let's see. I got to see if he still was Comfer traded, or was it?
Comfer was traded. Yeah,
right. So
they still have they still have Fashing. Bailey really impressed people at their rookie camp.
Yeah, I'm not a big Bailey guy because he's really a big project. But
yeah,
and Hurley would take a few years, but maybe they would look at a guy like Connor Hurley because they don't have a lot of centers in their system and hope that he could be more. Maybe it would take like Hurley and I don't know, Joel Armia, or Hurley and
maybe Armia was included in the Bogosian.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he was.
Maybe a Marcus Foligno, because Marcus Foligno,
I could see that. Something like that, where you get a guy for the future, you get a guy you could plug in, because I don't think there's anybody defensively that they could give them that would really solve that. So maybe they would do something like that. I could see that.
And you also can't eliminate the possibility, whenever dealing with Buffalo, is the fact that they would be willing to retain salary. They're retaining salary.
You don't have to on Klein. You don't have to retain salary on Klein. If you
but I'm saying as part, like with what the Rangers and the Coyotes did. The Coyotes retained salary on Yandel for their own benefit.
Right.
The Sabres could do that if they trade a player who is making comparable to what Klein is making. They could retain $1 million, $1.5 million of that salary, like a David Legwand. They could retain $1.5 million of David Legwand's salary just to make things work for the Rangers.
That's true. So yeah, I could see them being trading partners. I could, and so that would make a little bit of sense out of a bad situation, because if it gets to that, it's a bad situation. There's just no way around it.
Yeah. Well, okay, guys, we're gonna end it now and start. We'll have another show tomorrow at 1:00. We'll probably have Bill Meltzer and Russ. And I toyed with the idea, and I think we'll do it. You know how you always say that the NHL draft, you can't really evaluate the NHL draft until about 5 years pass.
Right.
Well, we're gonna look at the 2010 NHL draft and maybe grade some of the players, and we'll just take the first round. We're not going to do the entire draft. That would be. You're
going to make me relive that. Okay.
Yeah.
I know where it's going, where it concerns me. So
I'm sorry. You mentioned.
It's all right. I'm a draft guy, so I will put on my draft hat.
Yes, you mentioned that player with such love and esteem in your voice. But anyway,
on the draft hat. Don't worry.
For Russ Cohen, this is Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.